going to talk a little bit about Martin Kippenberger, um, who is an artist who is not well known at all in the wider world, um, but in like a certain kind of like especially like refined or something like sector of the art world. Um, he's kind of like the patron saint of art, or that there's sort of a horizon that his work laid down or opened up, that still hasn't been um, like surpassed or uprooted or whatever metaphor you want to use. Um, and like there's something, I don't know. I sort of accept that. Like I agree with it in like in a certain way. Um, like any contemporary art is in the wake of Kippenberger, even though his heyday was really like the '80s. Um, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about just like the what his work means to me, I guess, and what the limitations are, in my view. Um, Maybe to start, I'm not so. There's two things I'm going to talk about with Kippenberger. There's a phrase of his, uh, "Every artist is human," and then there's a particular motif that he liked to use, which is like a drunk frog hanging on a cross with like a beer mug, and I think these encapsulate the meaning of his work pretty well. Um, so every artist is human, uh, is must be understood as a reaction to Joseph Beuys's phrase, every human is an artist. And Beuys is not terribly well known in the wider world either, but in Kippenberger's milieu, he was sort of like the ultimate artist, kind of. And what he meant by every artist is human is that we all have this capacity to create, that it's really sort of beneficial to our spiritual realization, to tap into. And he was very influenced by Rudolf Steiner, and he had a theory. His theoretical term was warmth, and warmth was, warmth is this. I don't want to make it sound too unsophisticated, but it is straightforward. Like that we all have this. It's like we're kind of these ovens, and that we can kind of melt the world around us and generate. We have this creative drive, and he sort of instantiated this in his work. He used fat to represent it, and so that egalitarianism of his in the context of fine art was pretty radical at the time, but it had this, and I associate him with the religious horizon, the aesthetic horizon of art, but it had this kind of mythos about it, and Kippenberger's work is really kind of like, it's the exact opposite of Beuys. He certainly has this egalitarianism in terms of the abjection of his work. Like his work, he would make these works that really, like, the point wasn't really the work at all. Like he would sort of have like 40 art shows at the same time at like galleries all over the world. And the point was almost his sort of manic desire to create and the sort of social interactions, the kind of collective desire and curiosity and investment in the art world. Um, and But it was kind of a critique of Beuys because Beuys had such a mystical. There's this grandiosity and this romanticism to Beuys, and the kind of humiliating, like Kippenberger saw art as much more of like an addiction, and he was an alcoholic, and he died of alcoholism, and he was like a predator and like a pretty mean person, and like but he sort of had this, he was sort of he was guided by this impulse to like just keep going with organizing these events and making this work, and like there's some kind of breach going on. It's very much a similar type of thing to what like now Kanye is doing with like wider public opinion, although it's much, I think, kind of more interesting with Kippenberger because it was new, and and so the motif of the drunken cross is the drunken frog on a cross is, it's I guess a point that I have to make is that there is both it was around this time, starting especially with Fluxus. This was like just right as like the art world as we know it was sort of being born, and like there was lots of money sort of about to be going into it, where like people were being in the art world as a kind of, like, it was kind of a religion, like a kind of cult, which was a sort of anti-metaphysical one, or a sort of avowedly atheistic one, or one that was very focused on art history, and a critique of whatever was going on in wider society. But structurally speaking, socially, it's just like Osho or something like that. It's a cult. And there's positive things about that and negative things about that. And this sense of like spiritual pregnancy somehow, of like, suffering, this kind of pure, like, you might think that the cross with the frog on it is sort of purely ironic, but it's not. There's some kind of sense in which the crucifixion of Christ, or just the crucifixion of Christ's life, is, Christ became fully human, or he was fully human, and there's something really human about Kippenberger that's just like more human than like anything that anyone had like ever done in art until that time. And it has this grossness, this like abjectness to it, but it's like rendering something about what it is to be like a desiring being, yeah. I mean, I just think that where and failure is a really important category here. That like you're constantly failing, and but failure actually maybe isn't such a bad thing. Maybe failure isn't such a failure. Maybe the only way to really be succeeding in living in a fully embodied way as a full subject, as a full human being, is to just be failing and failing and failing, and you're kind of failing upwards somehow. So there are some thoughts about Kippenberger as an exemplar, as a very, very powerful and important exemplar of the fervent cardinal of the horizon of contemporary art.